40% of adults use voice search at least once a day. And we at Witlingo are predicting that just as any serious business or organization has a website, a phone number, a Twitter handle, etc., they will need a voice portal on Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant. This is Brielle Nickoloff from Witlingo, and my conversation with Vickie Maris is coming right up.
You're listening to Agile Digital Business with host Vickie Maris. She's an author, speaker, and marketer, helping you with your business transition to digital in content marketing and customer engagement.
We've got a conversation coming up about the voice platform, voice first, voice search, several different topics that I'm going to dig into today with my new friend, Brielle Nickoloff, who is with Witlingo. I had the privilege of meeting Brielle at Podcast Movement 2019 down in Orlando, Florida. We happened to sit next to each other at a session. It was a voice panel. So there were several speakers up on the panel who have a lot of experience in using the voice platform. And Brielle and I got into a conversation, and I asked her to be a guest here on the podcast. So I am so honored to bring her here today to you on Agile Digital Business. Brielle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be on the show.
I have been fascinated to learn more about what you do, Brielle. I'll share with my audience a little bit that I've picked up from our conversation the other day and then from our chat down at the conference. Brielle her title at the company is Lead Product Marketing, and that's with Witlingo. And Brielle's going to tell us a little bit more about the company as we get into the conversation. This isn't a company-sponsored episode of the show. This is just my fascination with how fast things are moving with voice. And Brielle's going to share a little bit about what her position is, and I found it pretty interesting, so we'll dig into that in a minute. She has 2 different degrees from the University of Colorado at Boulder. Her degrees are in Neuroscience and Linguistics, and she was heading towards a field in medicine and took a turn, I think, when she started learning more about this career. So she'll tell us more about that in just a moment. I have also read from her LinkedIn profile that she speaks 3 languages. She has several publications to her credit. She hosts webinars for Witlingo. They have done voice for marketing. One was for podcasters and podcasting, and one was in the healthcare industry. Those are available and open to the public. She'll tell us about how to be a part of those if you'd like to be on one of the future webinars and able to chat and that sort of thing with the guests that they have on their upcoming webinar. So I'll ask her about that in just a moment. Brielle, I would love to have you add to your background and let others know a couple of things that maybe I have missed, and also how best can folks reach you. I'll let you go ahead and share whatever you would prefer for them to reach out to you if they have some interest in some things that you and I talk about today.
Sure. Thanks so much for the introduction. That was really, I feel very honored. So yes, anybody can reach me by emailing Brielle at witlingo.com. That's Brielle. And, or, ping me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Going off of what Vickie mentioned, I was led to the voice space kind of in a roundabout way. As you mentioned, Vickie, I was studying to go to medical school, had been double majoring in neuroscience and linguistics. And towards the end of my career, I actually took a seminar in my linguistics program that was about profanity. And I decided to focus my thesis, my paper, about like why we get so frustrated and annoyed at these different robots that we talk to all the time, whether it's Siri, or back then it was really mainly Siri that was all the data I could mostly find, like on YouTube. Sorry, that was the dog. so yeah, I started to get really interested in why we have really emotional reactions to these interfaces that are mediated through our voice, and how that is different than when we're just typing. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's it was very kind of a pretty major transition, but I'm so glad I ended up here because linguistics is the way that linguistics was always my real passion, and I never thought that I could kind of build a career with around linguistics, but now it seems very possible because of the major growth that we're seeing in and the proliferation of voice user interfaces in general.
It's just fascinating in general to me. I have way back in my undergrad career took one linguistics course. It was a graduate level linguistics course, but during my senior year of my uh, communications program, and was fascinated. It kind of was wishing I had more time to do more coursework in it. So I think you might be, other than that professor leading that course, you might be the first person I've had a chance to speak
Oh,
with
great.
who has pursued linguistics for one of their degrees. I'm curious, when you finished college, were you on a long job search, or was it this company or another company that just made you an offer right away with your experience and your interest in this field?
Right. So actually, what happened was I graduated and I was like, okay, this is a little bit scary. Like, I know I don't really want to take the MCAT anymore. And I'm kind of sad that I just now realized this. I, again, I had always been really, in love with just studying and learning as much about linguistics as possible. And neuroscience did tie into that. But at the core, I was just like, I'm trying to get all my prereqs done. I just want to go to med school. So once I realized that that wasn't happening, I kind of just did as much as digging and research and just trying to figure out, like, okay, I know that there are people out there creating these voices and these assistants that can talk back to us. There have to be. So at first I was like, well, it makes sense that I could just go become a coder. Like, I'll go learn Python, I'll go to a coding boot camp, and then I'll become a natural language developer in essentially. So
Mm-hmm.
after that, I tested out the waters, and I was like, well, I don't actually love this either. I mean, I'll do pretty much anything it takes to be able to work in this space. And so I was ready to kind of just work through the less interesting aspects of the development side and kind of just bite the bullet. But that kind of led me to these conversations with my best friend, actually. She had been studying art and design, and I had literally zero clue, like, what that world even meant. Um, so I started to kind of chat with her because she had been sending me these Google job postings, like, throughout college, like, Google needs linguists, Google needs these people that are thinking about the way people naturally speak. And I had always kind of seen them and been like, oh, that's amazing, but I again, like, I think a doctor is a safe route. And so finally I decided to really sit down with her and say, like, hey, what do you do? Like, what is design? What is this user experience stuff you're talking about? And it led
Mm-hmm.
me to realize that there's this whole other side of things that I had literally no visibility into when I was in college. Um, and so I started to realize that, there are people, it seems so obvious now, but there are people that develop websites, they are coders. And then there are people that design the websites, and they are, creatives and artists. And some people can do everything. But in general, you have these very defined roles. And that's what we're seeing finally emerge in voice as well. So it's not immediately obvious that somebody creating a voice user experience is not just a coder, right? Like a developer. But actually to create highly usable, very good user experiences when you're conversationally interacting with anything. You need both sides of that. You need a voice designer, you need somebody doing user research, and you also need somebody to build the experience. And those constituents are always working together. So that's kind of how I became aware that there was a whole other side of this, which is voice design. And then I started looking around for roles and for people really to talk to that were doing that sort of thing. So one day I just, Witlingo's CEO, Ahmed Bouzid, his post showed up in my LinkedIn feed, and he said, "Hey, we're looking for VUI designers. If you know what that is, or if you don't, and that's intriguing, then go ahead and send me a message." And yeah, the rest is history. So I began as a voice designer with Witlingo, and have since, because we're a startup, we all wear a lot of hats. So since then, as we've kind of turned into a product company versus an agency, we are. I've moved into the role I have now, which is more of a product marketing role.
Okay. Well, I was fascinated just thinking in general that you're in a position that didn't exist. I'm guessing 5 years ago, maybe even less. Would you say that's close, that this kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because if you think about it, like, so why is voice becoming so big so fast? I mean, it's almost like, okay, people find it humorous because it's like, oh, like, okay, you have a microwave, let's make it so you can talk to it. You have a clock, like, why not talk to it? So why are we even doing that? And voice, the growth we're seeing is so amazing. And the reason why is because when you think about it, language is, it's instinctual. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to learn how to talk and direct an interface that is mediated through your voice, the same way you have to learn what a hamburger menu means, or the way you have to learn how to type or to tap and click on a small screen. It kind of just goes back to the ease of use. So we're finally at a point where forever and ever we were trying to make it so this technology could actually understand us and could speak back to us. And once that happened, with Alexa, she was the first one that became pretty much mainstream. And once that happened, because it was so accessible, the rate of adoption was just incredible. It surpassed that of the iPhone. So yeah, now we're seeing, I mean, we need so many people in this field and so many different types of people thinking about it. Like, we do need developers, we need designers, we need people that are on the product side thinking about, how is this relevant for the business buyer, and why does it help a team or a company or an individual to have a quote unquote voice website, or, some sort of presence on these voice platforms.
Well, one of the questions I've wanted to ask you, I think, plays into what you were just sharing there. What does a business today need to do to be ready for the use of voice as more and more people are incorporating it into their daily lives?
Yes. So when I first joined Witlingo, and it's amazing to think back, that was just a few years ago, and how much has changed since then, even with, even just the general public knowing more about these devices. Like, back then I would explain what I did, and I would have to preface everything by, have you ever heard of Alexa, or, or even Siri, and most people had heard of Siri by then, but half the people I'd have to sort of explain, like, what Alexa is, and nowadays, everybody at least understands. And if you are, in a room of people and you're asking, how many of you have a voice assistant device at home, or how many use it on your smartphone, everybody has at least tried it, pretty much. So that's amazing in itself. But thinking back to when we were having discussions with businesses a couple of years ago, they would come to us and say, okay, we're thinking way ahead. We think that voice is something that we need to be paying attention to, but we have no idea what to even do. Like, what does that mean? What does it mean to go pay a company to build out a voice experience for you? And so we began by building one-off experiences for different brands and companies so that anybody could find them on Google Assistant or Alexa. And nowadays, we have refined our offering into a SaaS product, basically, where, because people are looking for answers first and foremost on these voice assistants, that is the top use case that you can really reach your customers and your listeners with. So what that means is, because just like with a website, you wanted to kind of start building your SEO roots really early on when these text-based search engines came out. And those who started building out very strong, rich content on any search engine would be the ones that would be pushed towards the top, right? And so now, because voice is such a different paradigm than text, right? There's no such thing anymore as seeing the 10 blue hyperlinks on Google's first page. If you ask a voice assistant a question about a brand or company or anything, what you get back is one single answer. Okay, it's not it's not a bunch of options anymore. And interestingly, we've been seeing, even in text-based search engines, that has been a shift that they've been moving towards as well. Of course, we have Google's answer box that has been kind of much more prevalent, and they're trying to really make it so that the answer box is something that shows up in many, a majority of searches now, because they're trying to make it so that a user's answer is answered at the top of the page. So there's actually quite an interesting parallel between that and what's going on with voice, because with voice, because of the way that information can be consumed when you're listening, you can't sit through a list of 10 different answers, right? You get one. So that's what is so fascinating about voice as compared to text-based search engines. And so when people now come to us, our product is designed so that you can sit down and record FAQs, if you will, about yourself or your company, and make it so that offering is what people will be able to find when they're actually searching for you on Alexa or Google Assistant.
Mm-hmm. The video that you created, it's you describing one of the available services. That's very helpful to watch. It's right there on the main page of I'm not sure if it's on the main page, but I easily found it on your website. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yes. So essentially, there are two things to consider with voice, right? The content creation and the content consumption. And it's the same, with the web. You have to have an easy way for somebody to create a website, but that content also has to be easily consumed. And that seems like a no-brainer, right? But early on, in the very early days of the web, I am told that it was not like that. So with voice, it's very interesting, because now we all have these little things in our pockets that can record native voice content, right? We all have something that can function as a recorder, pretty much. And that is solving the issue of the content creation that would not have been possible without, the ubiquity of smartphones. And so what Witlingo, our bet is that in a few years, it will be an absolute table stake to have your brand be present on voice, because right now, if you're not, oftentimes So the way that assistants are actually pulling information right now when they're asked something is, so they first search like their own internal Alexa database. It's a basic search. And so if you say, what's the weather, or just general like facts, then there's a database of information that has been pre-programmed for them to relay back to you. So if they can't find the answer there, they move out to the voice web, which in Alexa's case, that would be the Alexa skills. So those are third-party developers creating, developers and designers creating these experiences, and she'll pull one of those if she can't find something in her internal database. And then if she can't find anything there, then she'll go to the web search, which Alexa is powered by Bing. Obviously, Google Assistant is powered by Google. So it's a very unique opportunity to really start, again, create, like, planting those voice roots very early on. And we can't be relying on the content that has been already put out there onto the text-based web, because that content is not optimized to be consumed while you're listening to it, right? You've got to be thinking about the way that people actually ask questions versus type questions, because that is different. People usually use long-term searches when they're conversationally asking for it. So because we saw this pattern emerge, we wanted to make it so that any business team would be able to just record the answers to general things that they want to be an authority on, whether it's information about their company or information about their niche, and make it so that literally all it is recording those answers. And then if you are building out that rich voice-based content early on, basically right now, then you are going to have a leg up in the future when these algorithms are more refined and able to actually pull an answer from within those third-party skills that maybe you are an authority on, because you have already built out those voice roots. And in essence, we're seeing that you kind of have to be the answer, right? You have to own your answers when it comes to voice, the same way that you want to own the answers when it comes to the text-based web.
I want to pop in here for just a moment and say thank you for listening to this show. I so love it when you grab a screenshot of this episode and share it out on your favorite social media channel to let your friends and colleagues know about this show, about season 2 and the topic of voice, or specifically about this conversation that I had the privilege of holding with Brielle Nickoloff of Witlingo. There is a voice recorder you can use out on my website. It's on the contact form. So VickieMaris.com/contact. You'll see a button that you can use if you would like to record a question or a comment for me to consider for future episodes of the show. Thanks again for being here. I am quickly going to play just a short little snippet from last week's episode where I shared about the Amazon Alexa skill that I created for this podcast. So if you would like to add Agile Digital Business to your flash briefing, you can play them through your Amazon Echo device. All right, here's that quick snippet of last week's episode, and then we'll get back to the rest of the conversation with Brielle. There are a couple of different ways that you can add this particular skill as a flash briefing to get the news from the podcast. So one of the things you can do is go to your Amazon Alexa app and go to the settings and look for flash briefing. And then there's an option to add more flash briefing content. Then you'll want to enable the skill so that it will add to your flash briefing. And the name of the skill is Agile Digital Business. Another way you can do this is go to the Amazon store, use the drop-down menu, and select Alexa Skills, and then enter the name of the podcast, Agile Digital Business.
and you will have opportunity to enable the skill from there.
Are you seeing this when you talk about it's, there's no time like the present to be building up your voice content? Do you predict that this is as important for the B2B business as the B2C? Like it seems like a fairly obvious play to me if you have products you're selling directly to consumers. But do you guys work with any companies that sell to other companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually getting a lot of traction with marketing executives who have signature power, and they are the ones making decisions. And again, this was not, this is a fairly new phenomenon we're seeing, where a few years ago we were out there trying to explain to people why they needed to start thinking about voice and how they could build out their voice presence. And now people are coming to us and saying, okay, I know that this is real. I just need to get started somehow. And we're seeing, everything ranging from B2C, B2B, generally marketing, people in marketing roles on teams are the ones that are really thinking about it and starting to do the research on it.
Mm-hmm. I'm in a marketing role in the work I do for the university. I've just got this great sense of urgency about voice, and be talking about it next week in a program that we're running. And so it's just to speak, as one marketer to another, it certainly feels like something we need to jump on.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
not wait for all of our competitors to get the leg up.
Exactly. Yeah. It's almost like a brand new opportunity to be that first person that, got that domain name or became the first, that first hyperlink that Google shows, right? I mean, we're seeing that because the effort of asking a question is so minimal. 40% of adults every single day use voice search right now, and that is growing very rapidly. But because voice can so easily become a channel of first resort, this voice paradigm will hopefully be what people turn to first. And if they don't get what they need, they'll turn to their screen or a PC or whatever. But if you can deliver that value up front, it's so valuable. And it's almost like there are two bottom lines here. So you have customer care, which you can easily reach your customers by providing answers and information that they would need just by asking. You would be offloading tickets and calls into that contact center. And then there's also the digital marketing, right? So you would be able to surface first when a user asks Amazon or Google.
I noticed that with this podcast, Agile Digital Business, I did the short little episode. I was testing out my new Alexa skill that I had built for the podcast. And within just like 24 hours, when I jumped into iTunes and typed the keywords Alexa skill, that episode of the podcast came up in the first 2 rows of options.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, oh my goodness, okay, and now that's just using the Apple, the store, as one example, but that was a pretty quick response.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it had something to do with how I had titled the podcast, that particular episode, about a new, I don't remember now exactly what I called it, but something like a new Alexa skill available. And I had the words flash briefing in it, and something like for the podcast or something along those lines. I should have looked that up before we started talking, but oh gosh. Well, I do want to respect your time, Brielle. I'm going to begin to wrap us up here. Do you have anything else that you would like to add? And I'll throw in there, I'm open to another conversation later in the future if you feel like there's something we could develop out further in a second episode.
Sure. Yeah, so kind of just to wrap it up, we truly believe, based on the trends and the rates of adoption that we've seen with not only actual voice devices, but the way that, we're seeing consumers use voice on their phones, we're kind of banking on the idea that any serious business or organization who has a website, a phone number, Facebook page, Twitter, all of those social channels and all of those ways that you can access them. We really believe that voice is the next table stake to really prioritize. So yeah, I'm happy to speak with anybody about this more. Brainstorm ways that it's relevant within any industry, any space, and I'm really excited also to see, you and I had spoken about this earlier, but with creators that are the ones already making audio content, like podcasters. It's an amazing opportunity right now, because if you, sorry to open up a new can of worms, but if you go onto the Alexa skills store and you search for flash briefings, so flash briefings are these couple minute news, little bits of news that Alexa users can hear by just asking, "Hey Alexa, what's my news?" So if anyone who creates a flash briefing, it's a big deal, because if somebody actually adds that to their flash briefing lineup, they never have to remember the name of it to specifically invoke it anymore. They just add it to their lineup and they hear it in their morning news or their evening news. So right now, if you think about how many hashtags and handles on Instagram might have, vegan or paleo, or, just any buzzword nowadays, any quote unquote hashtag, that is such a saturated social channel, right? But right now, if you go on Alexa, and we're seeing that news is another one of the top uses that people actually really like to use Alexa for. People really like their routine of listening to a flash briefing, and there's there really aren't that many out there. Like, there are 750,000 podcasts in the world, and there are 5,000 flash briefings on Alexa right now. So you can go on there and search for your niche. You can go on and say, like, vegan flash briefing, or, like anything you could think of. Go ahead and just search it, and you'll see that most of the time it'll come up with no results. So that's, for us, also a really exciting opportunity to provide people that are really already thinking about how to produce audio content, or doing it already, like, on a regular basis, because you can more or less become a go-to right now, just like the way you could in the very, very early days of Instagram. So that's another thing we're really excited about at Witlingo, is being able to provide that capability through our platform to anybody that's interested in hosting a flash briefing.
Yeah, I was looking at, I think using Witlingo for that has got to be easier than the way I did it. I set up and I'm not a coder, by nature, but I set up a developer account, and it wasn't that hard to do. They provide all the step-by-step instructions and the template and all of that. So I selected the flash briefing, and they might have called it a blueprint template, not sure, but and I just use the RSS feed for my podcast, but that isn't necessarily ideal unless you have another workaround. I've learned, because it pulls in anything that I'm going to put out there on my RSS feed. So
basically, another feature that we're really excited about for that flash briefing use case specifically is, if you often have guests on your flash briefings, then you can grab a little embed code from your Witlingo portal, and it's basically like a recording button. You can stick it on your website or wherever you want, and then people can actually record thoughts or questions or feedback, and then that flash briefing host can just download that MP3 from their portal and, either feature it in an episode, or, use it to kind of, listen to feedback from users. So it's just another way to really get your listeners involved really easily, and then it goes beyond Alexa. So if you have a flash briefing, you can provide it there on Alexa, or you can provide it via a Google Assistant action. So what we really intend to do is be platform agnostic, to where we're providing you with an RSS feed, and then you can pretty much submit it to Spotify, anywhere else as well. So yeah.
Okay. I think that's just really interesting. Thank you for providing that service, and please pass it along to your fellow team members there at Witlingo. It's a neat thing that you guys are doing.
You think so? Yeah. Anyone who's listening can email me directly, and just mention that you heard me talking about it here, and we can get you set up for a year for free.
That would be awesome. All right. Well, Brielle, why don't we wrap things up with that? I really do appreciate your time today. This is very interesting. I'm excited about the field that you are pursuing for your career, and what you're doing at the company. And also, when I first met you and talked to you, I thought you are an ambassador for the voice platform, whether you think of yourself as that or not.
That's great to hear you say that. And it is such an exciting space. So it's, I really encourage anybody who has, any sort of interest in it to explore it, because the community is very small still. It's growing, and there are just amazing, incredible people all contributing to getting it to a point where we can really make any voice experience deliver what that user needs. So yeah, it's just an amazing space with creative, motivated people. And yeah, it's really exciting.
I first learned about it when I completed I'm also an author, and I had completed my audiobook, and I listened to podcasts from other authors and heard somebody talking about how important it is to have your books in audio format. And then they began talking about the voice platform. And so that was what led me down this path initially. And I just, every day I learned something new. I'm like, oh my gosh, got to try that. Got to do that.
Yeah. Have you heard of that conference, Digital Book World?
No, I haven't.
Okay. It's great. So Bradley Metrock, who started the Alexa conference, which is now called Project Voice, also really highly recommend that event. He also runs another one called Digital Book World, and it is basically all about, publishing in the age of voice and in the age of digital books, and it extends way beyond that. But yeah, I really recommend that one too. It's a great space.
All right, great. I'll look those up, and I will include the things that we've been talking about here in the show notes as well. So if you're looking for the show notes quickly, the easiest to find at my Libsyn blog, which is VickieMaris2.libsyn.com. So the 2, the numeral 2. And I eventually will also get them out on my website, VickieMaris.com, but they'll appear right away at the Libsyn blog. Well, thank you for your time. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a good conversation. So hopefully we can continue it in the future.
Yes. So everyone, if you would like to reach out to Brielle and ask her any questions about what she shared here in the podcast or what they are doing at Witlingo, you can reach her at her email address, brielle@witlingo.com. All right. Great. Thank you, Brielle.
Thanks so much for having me on. This was really fun.
Oh, I agree. I really enjoyed our conversation. All right, you take care and have a great weekend.
Okay, you as well.